children and all the children that are in the custody of Border Patrol today, as we speak, they are not being treated the way they deserve to be treated. They have left behind their whole lives, their families, did what every parent would do for their children. If I have nothing to eat, you bet I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to get food to my children. If nobody would help me, I would look and run as far as I need to run to get food to my children. And this is exactly what these families are doing. They are trying to flee violence. They are trying to feed their children. They are trying to have a better life. Because who doesn't? This country has hold the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have a statue that represents that has welcomed immigrants for years. And what is it? What does it mean to you? So, I think that these immigrants, these asylum-seeking families are living the American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what they're trying to do. And every single one of you, I know, are here because of that. And we need to share their stories because they can't. And we have wonderful people today that are going to share personal stories too of hope and success and how immigration's a good thing for our country. And I am an immigrant too. I came from Peru, and my mom, she was a single mom in Peru, and she raised me and my sister, and then she happened to meet a wonderful man standing over there somewhere. He said that, and he's American. He brought us here. We went through the lengthy, inefficient, extremely expensive process of citizenship, and here I am. And every immigrant has their story, and each story has the same value. It's a story of love, it's a story of hope, and it's a story of dreaming something better, a better life. So anyways, without any further ado, to the first speaker.
We're going to give you, yes, thank you, Natalie. Thank you for being afraid to come out and speak on behalf of those that are silent. We're going to ask Professora Cordero to share her story.
My name is Maria de Jesus Cordero. Can everyone hear me? I am a professor of Spanish at Utah State University, and I am the representative for social justice to the Parish Council of St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Church. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
And I was a child refugee. My family came from Cuba when I was only 2 years old. It was at the end of the 1960s.
Got it.
My father would have to stand.
Got it.
Oh, the mic is working?
Mic is working. Let's go over there.
Oh my.
Let's move to the...
Yeah.
Jerry.
Do we have to go over there? Can we?
Let's do this.
The mic.
Oh, there's also
All right.
I was a child refugee. My family after the triumph of the revolution, the economy in Cuba was going downhill. Food was scarce, it was rationed, and people were given tickets so that they could buy via the tickets a certain amount of items every month, and you had to wait in an extremely long line. My father was the one that waited in the line, and when he would get to the front of the line, very often they would have run out of what he was hoping to get, be it milk or coffee or rice. And this happened every time. My sister was only 9 months old at the time, and she was anemic. I was borderline anemic, and my mother was pregnant with my brother. My father had been, I guess what would be like the equivalent of a guard or a policeman in Cuba, and he was someone that very much valued justice, freedom, taking care of people, making sure that people had what they needed. And it hurt him that his children didn't have enough to eat. It hurt him that his children didn't have enough to eat. It hurt him that other people's children didn't have enough to eat. And so he would stand in the middle of the plaza and start to denounce this. And he would have ended up in jail if we had stayed there any longer. And I would have ended up in jail because I'm just like my father. I don't like injustices. I don't like to see children suffering, whether they're mine or somebody else's, whether they're of my own race or from my own country or somebody else's. They're still children. So my parents at the time, as any Cubans could do, they simply announced that they were leaving because they could. And Castro, what he wanted to do was get rid of us. He didn't want dissidents in Cuba. He was smart that way, I guess. He didn't want troublemakers around. So he said, okay, well, you want to go? That's just fine. It took 2 years to get our visas, and we had to live in my grandparents' house, and my mother was a teacher, and she lost her job, and things were hard, but they were able to do it, and the U.S. was willing to take us. So we came legally. We came legally because we could. There was a way to be able to do that. So when we finally got our visas, we got aboard a plane at Varadero, and this was one of the freedom flights. That's what they poetically called it back then, the freedom flights. And we landed in Miami. It's a half-an-hour flight from Varadero to Miami, and we were taken to a place called the Freedom Tower. And this is the equivalent of Ellis Island for the Cuban people. And we were processed there. My father was taken away from us temporarily. They asked him questions. Then he came back. They gave us coats because we were going to cold Chicago, where my uncle and his family lived. And we had never been anywhere that cold or ever seen snow before, and that was quite the experience. My father very quickly found a job with my uncle's help. He was always a very hard worker. And we did well. My father worked really hard. My uncle did. He put me and my sister and little brother through Catholic school, where we got a very good education, and I always loved to study. My father always encouraged me. It didn't matter that I was a girl. He said, you want to study? You do that. I want you to do as much as you can with your life. My father had only a 2nd or 3rd grade education because his family worked the land in Cuba, and there was not a schoolhouse anywhere nearby, and they didn't have the chance to go. Maybe his parents didn't see the need because the kids just worked the land, and that was his life, but he wanted something more for his children. That was part of why he brought us here.
And I was able to achieve a great deal on scholarship. I went to a Jesuit university in Chicago, Loyola. I went to New York University for my master's degree, and I went to Princeton for my doctorate in Romance languages and literature. My father was always very proud of me, but I was also always very proud of my father because of how hard he worked and how much he sacrificed for his family. And when I saw, as I'm sure all of you did, on television a few weekends ago, I remember it was a Sunday, it was actually my father's birthday, and I'm probably talking about him a lot because he passed away recently in early November. He was 92 and he passed away from Alzheimer's disease. And so on the day of his birthday, June 25th, I heard about a tragedy that occurred the day before. There was a father and a daughter. Oscar, I want to say his whole name because I want us to remember him. I think it was Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. And he was 25 years old. And he came with his wife, Tanya Avalos Martinez, and with his little girl who was almost 2 years old, just as I was when my family came from Cuba. And her name was Angie Valeria Martinez. She was 24 months old. And they were coming here for the same reasons that my family did at the end of the 1960s. So they were from El Salvador. El Salvador had suffered a civil war some years ago, and in reality, they haven't fully recovered from that civil war. Honduras, Guatemala have a similar history. They're called the Triangle of the North, and the immigrants or refugees are primarily coming from these three countries in Central America. And we have, as a country, a long history with them, a rather dark history. We helped to destabilize their countries during that time. And even today, we have been supporting the wrong people in the region. The Maras that they are fleeing from, they were actually formed between two cultures of violence, theirs and ours, because they were kids from El Salvador who were raised in East LA. And eventually they were sent to our prisons, which have a lot of violence, and finally they were deported to El Salvador. So they were raised between two cultures of violence, ours and theirs. And people are coming here because of economic hardship, the same economic hardship that my family experienced, but they're also fleeing from violence. Their governments are essentially absent. They are not able to protect the people from the Maras, and this is why they're coming. Statistically speaking, we have fewer refugees coming than in years past. But what we believe is happening, and there has been documentation to this effect, is that the current administration is purposefully trying to slow down the process so that fewer and fewer refugees are heard on a daily basis. And what happened with this family was that they were in Mexico, still near the Guatemala border. The temperatures were rising. They had been there for 2 months, and they were unable to get their asylum case heard. The father went to the U.S. Embassy and was turned away. And they were desperate, and so they decided to cross the Rio Grande. Temperatures were rising, and so because of this situation, people who are already desperate are coming via routes that are even more dangerous than in the past. And since the Trump administration has been pressuring Mexico to crack down on the refugees, they're not ceasing to come. Once again, they're coming by more dangerous routes. And so that is why we're seeing increasing numbers of deaths, and it is only going to get worse. The photograph that we all saw of the father and the little girl, if you looked at it closely, and I'm sure it was hard to because it was so heartbreaking, the father had tucked the little girl into his shirt, and you could see her tiny arm. She had her arm around her father's neck. And what had happened was that the father had gotten the little girl across the river and deposited her on the shore. And then he was going back to help the mother cross. But the little girl saw her father move away from her and started to panic. She thought he was leaving her. And so she jumped back into the water. And he saw her and he grabbed onto her. But the currents were so strong that he and his daughter went under. And so the mother, Tanya, was watching all of this helplessly from the other side. She saw her husband and her small daughter drown in the Rio Grande. And going back to the picture, the photographer, a Mexican woman named Julia Leduc, she said that she was so moved by the little girl's arm, how she still had it wrapped around her father's neck. And Leduc said that it was as if she were unwilling to let go of her father and wanted to go with him into death. And while that analysis is very powerful, I want to look at too what happened before. They came as a family, and the little girl thought her father was going to leave her when he started to swim away. So she jumped into the water to try to get back to him. And then the father saw the little girl drowning in the water, and he went back for her. And they were embracing each other, and they went into death together. And what that says to me is how important family is to the people from Latin America, to all of us. And how in the past, immigrants, usually the father would come, or maybe the mother, and families were divided. But increasingly, families are coming together because they've recognized how hurtful separation can be, how psychologically traumatic that is for children. And also because of the increasing danger. They don't want to leave their children behind. But what I'm trying to say is that that is what they're trying to avoid, but that is precisely what is happening on the border and throughout this country. We have criminalized these desperate refugees and used that as an excuse to take their children from them. And that, to them, is the most hurtful thing that you could possibly do to the parents or to their children. And the conditions in these camps are horrific. And it's not just the Democratic Congress members that are going into the camps to let us know this. A number of different institutions, pediatricians, human rights representatives from the United Nations. The United Nations has condemned us for the deplorable conditions that the refugees are in. So we're talking about children who are sleeping on concrete floors, in cold cells without blankets. Anywhere else, this would be considered child abuse. And that is exactly what it is. It is state-sanctioned child abuse. The children don't have access to baths. They have no soap. They have no toothbrushes. They have no hot food, no access to medical help. They've been getting sick increasingly and dying unnecessarily. The guards make fun of the refugees. They make fun of their suffering. They make fun of them even in death, in front of them and on Facebook, without any accountability whatsoever. This is not the United States that my family knew. This is not the United States that welcomed my refugee family in the late 1960s. This is not the United States that we have always prided ourselves in being. This is not the United States that we have been known to be around the world. This is a very different United States, and it's not even very united anymore, tragically. It is getting so that we can't hear each other. We can't see a photo and understand it and believe our eyes. We can't hear. We can't believe the experiences of others who have been to the border, who have come to try and open our eyes to terrible, terrible human suffering. The conditions that these different groups and individuals have described in these camps, it amounts to torture. This is exactly how political prisoners have been and are still being treated in Latin America. They put them in cold cells. They make them sleep on the cold, hard floor. They deprive them of light. They don't let them brush their teeth. They make fun of them. It is a form of torture, and it's meant to dehumanize. It is meant to break their spirits. And these people have committed no crime. To be a migrant is not a crime.
Yeah!
And as a country, we need to be aware. We need to help others to become aware of the truth. We have got to start speaking up. It doesn't matter how many friends we lose. It doesn't matter if people don't like us. This is actually happening. It is real, and it is frightening and so wrong.
She's right.
And we need to commit ourselves today, right now, if we haven't already. We need to commit ourselves to making sure that this does not continue, because this is not what our country is supposed to be about. This is not who we are.
Yes!
I'm gonna ask Luis to come over and talk about the trauma that kids are going through. Gracias, Luis.
Thanks, Crescencio. First of all, before I start talking, we did bring Know Your Rights cards. So if you know anyone in the community, that needs Know Your Rights cards, we have them in both Spanish and English. I have them in my hand. Ari in the back also has quite a few of them. So please come and grab some from us. As I really don't have anything prepared, but as a former child welfare worker, I saw a lot of atrocities, a lot of abuse happening within our system, a lot of hope as well from our parents.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
There you
I'm
go.
sorry about that. As I was saying, as a former child welfare worker, I have seen a lot. I have experienced a lot, and I have helped a lot of people within the system to provide those opportunities for them to be in a safe environment, to be aware of the opportunities that they are. What we are seeing right now within the cages, within the internment camps, the concentration camps, because that's what they are called right now. They are not a place for a child to be. The trauma that they are experiencing is going to be long-lasting. It's going to be with their lives, with them, not just with them, but with their friends, their family members, their community members. That's gonna lower their chances of survival. That's gonna lower their life expectancy. All this trauma that they're experiencing in their lives is not something that we should be proud of as a country. But as we look at the history, that's something that it's part of our deep-rooted in our history. Concentration camps, internment camps. It's all something that we keep telling ourselves as communities that it's not gonna happen again on our watch, but we keep letting it happen over and over again. We need to learn from that, but how are we gonna do that? Through kindness. Your vote, those that have the opportunity to vote, your choices matter, and it's gonna matter for the future. This is your time to speak up for those that don't have a voice. It is your opportunity to change history for the better and to have a more kind world within ourselves. It's a time to come together as community members. Something that I know as communities is that although they have experienced a lot of trauma, they have resilience, they have the strength in numbers, and even though we continue to walk under the shadows, our community members continue to walk under the shadows, they still will go out and work every day. I want you to think about this. Imagine that every step that you take, you're under fear of oppression, of being taken away from your family members, of not knowing what's gonna happen tomorrow, of not knowing if you're gonna come back to your family members. All of this, as you continue to take your steps, you're carrying that with you. And I want you to ask yourself, how long can you keep that up? How long can you keep the pressure of walking with these thoughts, of walking with this pressure of not knowing what's gonna happen, of not knowing if your friends are gonna be gone, if your families are gonna be separated, as you already fled a country that is not able to provide the services, the opportunities, and the safety for you to stay. So, it's hard to say this. I hope that our communities come together and show that they are welcome, that they belong here, and that they are here to stay.
Gracias, Luis. Christina, you want to share? Okay, so we have. We have Cristina Ledesma, who's going to share her story, her family story.
Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight to show your support for our families. I am the proud daughter of immigrant families. My parents came to this country almost over 50 years ago, and they came here with a dream. They came here for a better life. And thanks to my parents, Jose y Rebecca Ledesma, I am here. My skin is kissed by the sun of the central San Joaquin Valley in California's agricultural country. I was, at a very young age, taught the work ethic, to work really hard and to be proud of the work we do, working and toiling in the fields of California's Central Valley to bring our wonderful fresh fruits and vegetables to our grocery stores, that now you can come to the grocery store and pick out your fresh fruit. Those fruits and vegetables were picked by migrant farm workers. And if you were to go to California's Central Valley right now, you would see farm workers toiling in the hot sun. Thanks to Cesar Chavez and to Dolores Huerta, things changed for farm workers in California Central Valley. Now they can have cold water, they can have bathrooms, they can take breaks, and they don't have to die underneath the hot summer sun. Education has provided me a space for growth and opportunity. I went on, as the youngest of 6 kids, I went on to study at a community college because my parents couldn't afford a school for me. They couldn't afford to put me through school. So I knew that I wanted a better life. I knew that I didn't want to work in the hot packing houses of California, Central Valley. I knew I wanted a better life, and for that meant going to school and getting an education. And I went on to get my associate's degree, and then I went on to get my bachelor's of science degree at the University of California at Davis. After that, I went on to get my master's in public health because I knew that I wanted to make a difference in my community and not to be ashamed of where I come from or who my parents are or who my family is. And I wanted to teach that to my 3 young children here. The power of education, the power of an opportunity. And that's why people come to this country, to seek a better way of life. And that is so true, and I'm thankful for my parents, Jose and Rebecca, for coming here to this country almost 60 years ago for a better way of life. We didn't come here to rob. We didn't come here to steal. We didn't come here for violence, to create violence, or to take anything away. My parents never asked for public assistance because they were too proud. Because they knew that they knew how to work, and they taught us to work. And to never ask for anything free. They wanted us to have a better opportunity than they did. And so I'm thankful for my family, for my parents, for my brothers and sisters. And migrants don't come here to take anything away from anybody. They want to do things that are right. They want to do things that are going to add to our world, to our community. And so I want to thank you for being here and showing your support, because a lot of these families don't have a voice. It's been taken away from them, not out of their choice, but because of the world that we live in today. It's not a very nice world. So I ask you this evening to do something kind to someone, to reach out and help a neighbor, a friend, and to smile to someone, because that's the best way that we can show our love and support to each other, and not to judge each other, not to judge the color of our skin, our sexual orientation, not to judge our religious beliefs or our political beliefs, but that we're all here on this earth for a reason and for a purpose. And so go out and do something kind to someone. Say something nice, share a smile, and thank you for your time.
Gracias, Cristina. 33 years ago, I came to this country undocumented. I crossed the border by myself, 16 years old, in San Diego, California. I worked in the fields for 4.5 years, and thanks to the law passed in 1986, I was able to receive residency, and then 20 years later, citizenship. I worked really hard since the very time, almost the next day I came into this country, I had a job. And I've been working ever since. I went to 3 different universities. I have a PhD, and I'm a professor at Utah State University. Immigrants don't come here because they want something given to them. What they want is an opportunity. They want an opportunity to succeed and to provide for their families. I have been able to help my father and my mother who still live in Mexico. I send to them money almost every month, and I talk to them weekly, and I visit them. My life here in the United States has been incredibly. I mean, I cannot thank enough this country for all the opportunities that I have received. And when I see all these immigrants and friends of mine that are now hiding behind their doors, unable to open the doors. It reminds me of what fear can do to a person. It's almost like being in jail in your own home, and it's really difficult. It's really difficult to talk to them. They just don't want to watch the news anymore. They're trying just to survive. It's almost they're in a stage of constant survival, and that's what they're doing. I wrote this poem a couple of months ago, and I always go back and I always get these feelings of frustration. A lot of the times, poetry for me has been a way to put my feelings and frustrations into paper. So I want to share this poem to you tonight. I know we're getting close to the 8 o'clock, and we ask you to be here from 7 to 8. So here it is. The title of the poem is Miss Liberty, Why Have You Forsaken Us? How long, Miss Liberty, before you tell me again everything is going to be all right? How long? As you can see, I'm a very emotional person. That's how I've been always, all my life. How long, Miss Liberty, before you see me fall into a dark blizzard of snow, struggling to get up? How long, Miss Liberty, before my family breaks into pieces, waiting with dignity? While you shame them for wanting a better life? How long, Miss Liberty? Before my legs give out and my voice whimpers in despair, tonight I call on you, Miss Liberty, praying with my eyes closed that you will stop the violence against the tired, the poor, the heart of masses yearning to be free. Tonight, I call on you, Miss Liberty, dreaming that one day I will wake up from the dirty dream I call trauma. Tonight, I call on you, Miss Liberty, dreaming that Americans will see beyond the color of my skin through this perilous fight. I pledge allegiance to the indivisible, to Martin Luther King, to Cesar Chavez, to Dolores Huerta, and to Rosa Parks. I pledge allegiance to the bombs bursting in air, shining this lonely path to reclaim our humanity. I pledge allegiance to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of the undocumented, the African Americans, the Latinx Americans, the LGBTQ Americans, the Muslim Americans, and the Me Too Americans. Tonight, I call on your name, Miss Liberty, to join the resistance and fight together for freedom and justice for all. Muchas gracias.